Whew. He pulled her from the gang's grasp. Then she named the man they both wanted dead. The city never slept. Neon lights flickered across the rain-slicked streets, reflecting in puddles like broken glass. Drones buzzed above, scanning for trouble, while the hum of hovering vehicles filled the air. Amid this chaos, in a narrow alley behind a stack of rusted shipping containers, Leora's soft cries echoed, cutting through the usual city noise. She was trapped. The gang had cornered her, their cybernetic enhancements glinting under the neon light. Their leader, a hulking figure with metal arms and a face tattooed with glowing lines, stepped closer. "No one escapes me," he growled, gripping her arm tighter. Leora struggled, but their mechanical strength was too much. She swallowed her fear and tried to stay calm, her mind racing for any chance of escape. Far above, Caden watched from the shadows. He had been tracking this gang for weeks, waiting for the right moment. Once a military operative, now a freelancer for justice in a city where rules meant nothing, Caden knew he had one chance to save her. He adjusted the straps of his combat suit, feeling the hum of the energy shield along his back. His eyes scanned every exit, every patrolling drone. Timing was everything. Caden leapt from the rooftop, landing silently behind a stack of crates. The gang members were focused entirely on Leora, unaware of the predator watching them. Caden activated the stealth mode on his suit. His movements became nearly invisible to sensors. He slipped closer, careful not to make a sound. Leora froze as one of the gang members raised a baton, glowing red with energy. She winced, expecting the worst. Then a soft thud echoed behind the group, and one of the men vanished from the alley floor as if swallowed by shadows. Caden moved like water, fast and silent. Within moments, he disabled 2 more gang members, their mechanical limbs sparking and twitching. Leora watched in disbelief, her fear mixing with a strange growing hope. You're here to help me?" she whispered, her voice trembling. "Yes," Caden replied, his tone calm but urgent. "Stay close to me and don't move until I tell you." The gang leader roared, noticing the disappearances. His mechanical eye glowed as he searched for the intruder. Caden used the distraction, sprinting forward to grab Leora. Her small frame fit into his arms like a puzzle piece. "Hold on," he said. They ran together through the alley, dodging swinging batons and laser grids. Caden's knowledge of the city's layout became their lifeline. He vaulted over crates, slid under neon signs, and ducked through hidden passages only locals knew. Leora clung tightly, her heart pounding, feeling the rush of adrenaline as fear and relief collided. The gang leader cursed and followed, using his enhanced strength to leap over obstacles with terrifying speed. Caden glanced back, calculating. There was no time for a simple fight. They needed to vanish. He pulled Leora into a narrow maintenance tunnel, hidden behind a wall panel. The gang's leader slammed into the wall, sparks flying from his cybernetic limbs. "Go!" Caden urged, pushing Leora further into the tunnel. "This way. I know it will lead us to safety." Leora stumbled but followed, her trust in him growing with every step. The tunnel twisted and turned, a secret path beneath the city. Caden moved quickly, knowing the gang would not give up easily. He had faced many enemies in his life, but this fight was different. Leora was not a soldier. She was a human in need of rescue, and that made him more determined. As they ran, Leora asked, Why are you helping me?" Caden didn't answer immediately. The question was simple, but the truth was complicated. He had seen too much pain, too much cruelty in this city. Sometimes the right choice was simply to save a life when it could be saved. "Because it's the right thing," he finally said, "and because I can." They emerged from the tunnel into an abandoned industrial district. Rusted cranes and forgotten factories surrounded them, but it was better than the gang's alley. Caden paused to catch his breath, scanning the area. The city hummed around them, indifferent to the danger that had just passed. "Are you hurt?" he asked, checking her arms and legs for injuries. Leora shook her head. "Just scared," she admitted. Her voice was small but steady, showing strength despite her fear. Caden nodded, understanding more than she could know. Fear was natural, but survival required action, courage, and sometimes trust in strangers. "Good. Stay close." "We're not safe yet," he said. They moved cautiously through the empty streets, the neon signs reflecting off puddles like shards of broken mirrors. Every shadow could hide another threat. But Caden had a plan. He led her to a safe house he had prepared months ago, an old apartment stocked with food, medical supplies, and tools for communication. Once inside, Leora collapsed into a chair, exhausted but alive. She looked at Caden, trying to understand the man who had risked everything for her. I don't even know how to thank you, she said. You don't have to, Caden replied, pouring them both a cup of water. Just stay alive. That's thanks enough. For a moment, silence filled the room. The only sound was the soft hum of the city outside and the distant sirens that never seemed to stop. Leora took a deep breath, trying to calm her racing heart. Then, almost reluctantly, she spoke. There's someone I need you to know about. Caden raised an eyebrow. Go on. She hesitated, as if the words were dangerous even to say. His name is Rael. He's the one I wanted gone, and I know you've been hunting him too. Caden froze for a moment, the weight of the name sinking in. Rael was not just another gang leader. He was a man with influence, technology, and a reach that could touch every corner of the city. People whispered about him, called him untouchable. And yet here was Leora, naming him as their mutual target. You know what this means? Caden asked, his voice low. Going after him, it won't be simple. He's dangerous, smarter than anyone we've faced. I know, Leora said, her eyes steady. But if we don't, people will keep dying. And I can't let that happen. Caden studied her for a long moment. He had seen courage before, but this was different. Leora was not just scared. She was determined, even in the face of impossible odds. That determination reminded him why he had chosen this life, why he had risked everything to save someone who mattered. All right, he said finally. We'll need a plan. But first, we rest. We've earned at least that. Leora nodded, the tension in her body slowly easing. She had survived the gang's grasp, thanks to a stranger who became her protector. And now, with a name whispered between them, a new mission loomed on the horizon. One that would test their courage, their wit, and their humanity. As night deepened over the city, Caden and Leora sat in the quiet apartment, listening to the hum of life outside. Somewhere in the distance, the gang would regroup, and somewhere else, Rael would continue his schemes. But for now, they had each other, and they had survived. Outside, the neon lights glimmered like a promise. In a city built on chaos and steel, human courage still shone brightest. And Caden knew as he looked at Leora that together they could face what no one else dared. The first step had been taken. The rescue was complete. But the war was just beginning. The city was quiet in the early morning, but only on the surface. Above, drones hummed, scanning streets and rooftops. Caden and Leora moved through the abandoned industrial district, their footsteps light on the cracked concrete. The safe house behind them now felt like a cage. They needed to move, to find Rael before he struck again.
Leora's voice broke the silence.
I can guide you. I know where he keeps his operations hidden, at least part of them. Caden studied her. Her knowledge could make the difference between life and death. Lead the way, he said, adjusting the straps on his combat suit. Though she was not trained for war, her courage and street smarts had already saved her life once. He trusted her instincts. They moved like shadows, slipping through alleyways and abandoned factories. Every corner they turned was a potential threat, but the humans' advantage, adaptability, and thinking kept them one step ahead. Caden taught Leora how to check for sensors, how to detect surveillance signals with just her eyes and the small scanner he had given her. Their first stop was a deserted warehouse near the river. Leora had been here once as a messenger for information networks that Rael used to communicate with his subordinates. The place smelled of rust and damp, but it was safe enough to investigate. Inside, Leora activated a small holographic map stored in her wrist device. A faint blue light traced a network of underground tunnels and warehouses across the city. Here, she said, pointing at one of the nodes, Rael's tech lab. It's heavily guarded, but he isn't always there. He moves between locations. Caden nodded. We need more than luck. We need a plan. Sensors, guards, drones, everything has to be accounted for. They spent hours studying the map, marking patrol patterns and potential weak points. Leora's eyes shone with concentration. She wasn't just following orders. She was planning, calculating. Caden realized something important. Humans were unpredictable, yes, but that unpredictability was an advantage. No machine, no matter how smart, could match it entirely. Night fell again, and the city's neon lights flickered on. Caden and Leora approached the warehouse district where Rael's operations were rumored to be strongest. The streets were eerily empty, as if the city itself knew danger was near. Suddenly, a loud metallic clang echoed behind them. Both spun around. A drone hovered above, scanning with a red light. Caden pressed a button on his suit, activating a pulse that temporarily disabled the drone's sensors. It wobbled, sparking, before crashing into a pile of metal crates. "That was close," Leora whispered. "Too close," Caden replied. "We have to move faster." They crept into the shadows, following a path between the warehouses. Caden's mind raced. Rail's men could be anywhere. Every sound, every flicker of light was a potential threat. He reminded himself to stay calm, to trust his training and instincts. Humans were capable of extraordinary things when they adapted, and he and Leora had already proven that. They reached a tall warehouse with reinforced metal doors and no visible windows. Caden crouched behind a stack of crates, signaling Leora to do the same. "This is it," he said. "The lab should be inside, but it won't be easy. There are likely automated defenses, maybe even traps." Leora nodded, her jaw tight with determination. "We can do it." Together, Caden admired her courage. It wasn't just bravery. It was intelligence, problem-solving, the essence of human resilience. They entered a side door using a hack device to bypass the basic locks. Inside, the smell of chemicals and machinery filled their noses. Rows of computers hummed, and cables snaked across the floor like metallic snakes. Leora's eyes widened. "This is bigger than I thought." They moved quietly, keeping low, scanning for security cameras and guards. Then, from a distant room, came the sound of voices and machines working. Caden motioned for Leora to follow. They crept closer, sticking to the shadows. Through a partially open doorway, they saw it. Rail's experiments. Robotic limbs were being tested. Holographic projections of his control devices flickered on monitors, and a small group of augmented enforcers worked under his command. Caden's jaw tightened. This man was building something that could change the city, maybe even enslave it. "We can't let this continue," Caden muttered. "No," Leora agreed. "People will die if he succeeds." Caden studied the layout. They could not fight directly. The enforcers were too strong, the devices too advanced. But humans had ingenuity. He whispered a plan to Leora, who nodded quickly. They would create a distraction, then slip inside to gather data and sabotage equipment. The plan was simple in theory, dangerous in practice. Caden set a small device near the ventilation system, programmed to emit an electromagnetic pulse. The lights flickered, machines sputtered, and the enforcers rushed to investigate the sudden malfunction. "Go!" Caden hissed. They slipped through the chaos, moving like shadows. Leora's heart raced, but she stayed focused, following Caden's lead. They reached a secure terminal and began downloading data, capturing blueprints of Rail's devices and schedules of his movements. Every second counted, then a voice rang out. "Stop them!" The enforcers had discovered the data breach. Caden and Leora bolted, carrying the devices and data drives. A chase began through the winding corridors. Laser turrets activated, and Caden used quick thinking to disable several, using overturned crates and sparks from electrical panels as cover. Leora's quick thinking helped too. She created temporary barricades and guided Caden through hidden passages, showing him routes only she remembered from previous encounters in the city. Together, they were unstoppable, proof that human creativity and courage could overcome even high-tech security. Finally, they burst through an emergency exit onto the streets. Rain poured down, washing away the lights and chaos of the chase. Caden checked the data drive. "We have what we need," he said, breathing heavily. Now we know his plan. And his next move. Leora looked at him, her eyes bright. "We can stop him." "Yes," Caden replied. "But we have to be smarter than he is, faster. And we have to trust ourselves and each other." They moved silently through the night, knowing that Rael would soon notice the intrusion. But for the first time, they had hope. They had a plan, information, and each other. The city was dangerous, yes, but humans had something that machines could never replicate. Ingenuity, courage, and the will to fight for what was right. Hours later, they returned to a safe hideout hidden beneath the ruins of an old factory. Caden spread out the data drives on a metal table. "We need to analyze this. Find weaknesses, patterns, anything that will help us take him down without risking more lives." Leora nodded, poring over the schematics. "I can do it. I can figure out how his devices work and how to stop them." Caden smiled faintly. "I like that attitude." The city outside remained alive, indifferent to their mission. But inside the factory, humans were planning, thinking, and preparing. The first strike had been successful, but the war was far from over. "You know," Leora said quietly, "he underestimated us. He thinks humans are predictable, easy to control. But we—" Caden nodded. "Exactly. That's why we can win. We adapt, we improvise." And we never give up. They worked through the night, poring over every piece of data, mapping every known location, and planning the next steps. Each discovery brought new challenges, but also new hope. Caden realized something important. In a city dominated by machines and fear, humans still had an edge. The ability to think, feel, and act in ways no algorithm could predict. By dawn, their plan began to take shape. They would strike at Rail's next location, using every advantage they had, knowledge, courage, and human ingenuity. The city would not be his playground, not while they were alive. And somewhere in the shadows, Rael's enforcers regrouped, unaware that their prey was already steps ahead. Caden and Leora were ready for what came next. The hunt had begun, and humans were not backing down. In a city built on chaos, 2 humans had found their strength, not in weapons or machines, but in trust, courage, and cleverness. And that strength would be the key to surviving what lay ahead. The first strike had ended, but the real fight was only beginning. The city below looked tiny from the orbital lab's observation deck. High above, in the quiet darkness of space, Rael's fortress hung like a shadow over the neon-lit skyline. Caden and Leora floated in the cargo bay of a small shuttle, their suits sealed and systems running. The airlock hissed softly, the only sound in the vast emptiness. "This is it," Caden said, checking the controls. "Once we're inside, there's no turning back." Leora nodded, gripping the handles of her harness. "I know. Let's make it count." The shuttle docked silently with the orbital lab, its magnets locking with a faint hum. Caden and Leora moved through the narrow corridors using handholds and magnetic boots to keep themselves steady in zero gravity. The silence of space made every sound echo, every movement deliberate. They knew Rail's enforcers were trained, alert, and likely enhanced with cybernetic implants. One mistake could cost them their lives. The lab was massive, more extensive than either had imagined. Holographic screens displayed data streams, energy flows, and schematics of machines that could control entire city districts. Robots moved methodically along clean floors, testing prototypes of devices that could manipulate minds and bend humans to Rael's will. The sight was terrifying, but also motivating. Caden's jaw tightened. Humans had to act. Humans had to stop him. They found a maintenance hatch and crawled inside, squeezing through ducts and service tunnels. Leora's hands trembled slightly, not from fear, but from the knowledge of the stakes. Caden glanced at her, seeing determination reflected in her eyes. "Stay close," he whispered. "We'll reach the main terminal, gather what we need, then get out." They emerged into a storage corridor lined with crates stamped with Rail's symbol, a glowing triangle with 3 concentric circles. Leora scanned the room with her wrist device. "This way," she said, pointing toward a security console tucked behind a stack of equipment. Caden and Leora worked quickly, hacking the console to access Rail's internal network. The screens flickered, revealing live feeds, research notes, and plans. Leora's eyes widened as she realized the scale of Rail's ambition. He's not just controlling gangs. He's building a network to control everyone in the city, she whispered. "Everyone." Caden nodded grimly. "We can't let that happen, but we need proof. Data he can't hide." They copied files, blueprints, and schedules, their fingers flying over virtual keyboards. Suddenly the floor vibrated. Heavy footsteps echoed down the hall. "We've been spotted," Caden said. Leora's eyes darted around. "What do we do?"
"Follow me."
"Fast and quiet," Caden replied, leading her toward a maintenance elevator. They slid inside just as 2 robotic enforcers turned the corner, their glowing eyes scanning for intruders. The elevator moved upward, taking them closer to Rael's private chambers. Caden and Leora knew that's where the real danger lay. The warlord himself was there, surrounded by advanced security systems and loyal guards. They had to be clever, careful, and fast. The doors opened to a wide corridor. Laser grids crisscrossed the hallway. Sensors monitored every vibration, and cameras scanned for movement. Caden studied the pattern. "We move with the timing of the pulses," he whispered. "Follow my lead." Step by step, they navigated the corridor. Leora mirrored Caden's movements, holding her breath, feeling the tension coil in her chest. Every step brought them closer to Rael, and every second increased the risk. At last, they reached the main chamber. Through a reinforced window, they could see him. Rael was taller than expected, his body enhanced with cybernetic limbs and glowing implants. Yet his posture carried arrogance, confidence in his intellect and power. Around him, machines hummed, Holographic schematics floated in the air, and assistants, some human, some robotic, moved under his direction. Caden's eyes narrowed. He's dangerous and smart. More than any gang leader we've faced. Leora whispered, "We can't fight him directly. We have to outsmart him." Caden nodded. Humans had one advantage: creativity, the ability to improvise, and the will to act in unpredictable ways. Machines could calculate, but they could not feel, adapt, or take risks the way humans could. Suddenly, Rael turned, and for a brief moment, his eyes locked with theirs, through the window. Caden's heart skipped a beat. The warlord smiled, almost as if he knew they were there. But he returned to his work, confident in his defenses. "This is it," Caden said. "We get the information, sabotage what we can, then leave. No heroics." They worked swiftly. Leora accessed a terminal connected to Rael's control network, planting a virus to disrupt his automated enforcers. Sparks flew as the virus triggered minor malfunctions, creating confusion among the robots. Meanwhile, Caden secured the data drives, ensuring they had all the evidence of Rael's plans. Then came the shock. A hidden panel opened and Rael stepped out of the shadows. His face was partially human, partially mechanical, but there was a spark of something familiar in his eyes, a spark that made Caden pause. "Surprised to see me?" Rael asked calmly, his voice echoing in the chamber. "You think you understand humans? But you don't understand me." Leora stepped forward, her voice steady. "We know enough. Your experiments, your control, your plans, they end now." Rael chuckled softly. "You're brave. I'll give you that. But bravery without understanding is foolishness." Caden's mind raced. He realized something crucial. Rael had not always been a villain. There was a trace of humanity buried beneath the cybernetics in obsession. "What are you?" Caden asked. Rael's expression darkened. "I was once like you," he said. "A human trying to make the world better. But humanity is weak. It must be controlled. And I will do what others cannot." Caden and Leora exchanged a glance. This revelation made their mission more complicated. The man they sought to stop was not simply evil. He was a fallen hero, corrupted by obsession and technology. But that did not change their goal. Humans still had to survive. The city still had to be free. Rael advanced, his cybernetic limbs whirring. "You cannot stop me. Give up or perish." Caden tightened his grip on his equipment. "We don't give up. Humans don't give up." Leora activated the virus fully, watching as Rael's automated guards began malfunctioning. Sparks flew, lights flickered, and the lab descended into controlled chaos. Rael's attention was divided, giving them an opening. "We need to move!" Caden shouted. They darted through the chamber, dodging bursts of electricity and malfunctioning robots. Leora used her knowledge of the lab's layout to guide Caden through hidden passages, past security nodes, and toward the emergency exit. As they neared the exit, Rael raised a hand, activating a containment field. The air crackled with energy. "You cannot leave," he called. Caden glanced at Leora. "Trust me." He grabbed a control panel and triggered a system-wide override, temporarily shutting down the containment field. The corridor ahead opened, and they sprinted through, adrenaline pumping. They reached the shuttle and launched back into the cargo bay. Floating in the silence of space once more, they allowed themselves a brief moment to catch their breath. Leora looked at Caden. "We made it. We survived." Caden nodded. "Yes." "But we know now what we're up against. Rael's not just dangerous. He's brilliant. And he's obsessed. We have to be smarter, faster, and more prepared than ever." Leora's eyes shone with determination. "We can do it. Humans always find a way." Caden smiled faintly. That was the truth. Humans could adapt, think, and act in ways no machine could predict. That was their strength, the very reason they had survived this far. And that strength would be their weapon in the fight to come. They looked down at the city below, tiny and fragile in the pre-dawn light. Somewhere Rael would rebuild, plan, and prepare. But Caden and Leora had learned more than they had hoped. Knowledge, courage, and human ingenuity were as powerful as any weapon. The next phase of their mission was clear. They would strike again, more carefully this time. They would protect the innocent, outthink the warlord, and remind the city that humanity still had the power to fight back. In the vastness of space, 2 humans had faced a near-impossible challenge, and survived. That survival was more than chance. It was courage, planning, and the essence of what made them human. And now, the real challenge awaited. bringing Rael down before he could rise again. The city lay beneath them, a web of neon lights, buzzing drones, and endless activity. Caden and Leora crouched atop a high-rise, watching Rael's forces mobilize below. The orbital lab had been disrupted, but they knew it was only temporary. Rael would regroup. He would strike back. "We can't attack directly," Caden said, scanning the streets with binoculars. "He's too powerful. Too many guards, drones, and automated weapons. But humans have advantages he can't predict." Leora nodded. "We use the chaos. We force him to act, then counter. That's when he's vulnerable." Caden smiled faintly. "Exactly. Let's remind him why humans survive no matter how advanced the machines get." They moved swiftly, navigating the rooftops and shadowed alleys, using every skill they had honed over the past few days. Leora carried the virus files that could disable Rael's citywide control system, and Caden carried their weapons and tools. Every step required careful calculation, but the city itself seemed to bend in their favor. Drones malfunctioned from Leora's earlier hacks, streets were partially cleared, and even the gang's remnants now acted unpredictably, giving them cover. Their first target was a communications hub. If they could disrupt Rael's ability to coordinate, they could level the playing field. Leora crouched beside the main terminal, fingers flying over the controls. Sparks danced from the overloaded circuits as she activated the virus. Alarms blared, but the network collapsed, leaving Rael's forces in confusion. Caden covered her, scanning for guards. A small patrol appeared, but instead of fighting, they froze, malfunctioning under the virus's effects. Humans adapted quickly. Caden and Leora used this moment to vanish into the shadows, leaving the enemies confused and helpless. "This is it," Leora whispered, breathing hard. "We're in control now, at least for a moment." Caden nodded. "A brief moment can change everything. We have to strike smart." They moved toward Rael's main base on the ground, a fortified skyscraper lined with sensors and drones. The streets were chaotic. Malfunctioning robots crashed into walls, their mechanical limbs flailing while Rael's human enforcers scrambled to regain control. Caden and Leora slipped through the chaos, unseen, using narrow alleys and service passages. Inside the skyscraper, Rael was already aware of the disruption. His holographic interface flickered, showing every sector compromised. He clenched his cybernetic fists, his glowing eyes scanning the city. "Humans, unpredictable, foolish, but dangerous," he muttered. Caden and Leora reached the main chamber where Rael had stationed himself. Laser grids crisscrossed the room, automated turrets rotated slowly, and the air was charged with energy. Caden crouched behind a console, signaling Leora to do the same. "We take him by surprise," Caden whispered. "We can't fight directly. We use his own technology against him." Leora activated a secondary virus she had prepared, targeting the chamber's automated defenses. Sparks flew, turrets malfunctioned, and the lights flickered, creating confusion. Rael's attention snapped to the interference. "You think this'll stop me?" he roared. But Caden and Leora were already moving. Using the shadows and the momentary confusion, they navigated the room, dodging electric pulses and collapsing machinery. Every move relied on human timing, intuition, and adaptability. The things no machine could predict. Finally, they reached Rael. He was imposing, enhanced by cybernetics, yet there was something almost human in his frustration. "You persist," he said, his voice echoing with anger. "But humans, you cannot win." Caden stepped forward, his voice steady. "We already have. Humans always survive, and we fight for more than control. We fight for freedom." Leora activated the final stage of the virus. The room's systems erupted in sparks and lights, the hum of machines becoming distorted. Rael staggered, his control over his devices slipping. Caden grabbed one of Rael's control panels and redirected its energy. The containment field around the warlord flickered and collapsed. "No!" Rael shouted, realizing he had underestimated the humans. Caden and Leora advanced carefully. There was no need for brute force. Strategy and ingenuity were enough. Using a combination of the virus and Rael's own devices, they contained him within a temporary field, neutralizing his cybernetic enhancements without harming him. "You see?" Caden said. "You relied on control and fear, but humans adapt and we improvise. That's why we survive." Rael struggled, but the field held. Leora approached calm and resolute. "Your ambition was too great. But your obsession blinded you. Humans can always find a way, even against the impossible." The room fell silent, the only sound the faint hum of malfunctioning machines. Rael's arrogance was gone, replaced by a quiet, grudging respect. He realized he had been outsmarted, not by technology, but by human creativity and courage. Caden and Leora stepped back, breathing heavily but triumphant. "The city is ours," Leora said, looking at the flickering screens. "We stopped him." "Yes," Caden replied, "but more importantly, we reminded the city that humans cannot be controlled." They moved out of the skyscraper, the streets below slowly clearing as Rael's influence waned. Civilians cautiously emerged, witnessing the aftermath of the disruption. No one had been harmed unnecessarily, and the humans who had fought and survived became symbols of hope. Caden and Leora reached a high rooftop, overlooking the city. Neon lights reflected off rain puddles, cars moved cautiously, and the hum of drones was finally less threatening. They stood side by side, their bond strengthened by everything they had endured. "We did it," Leora said softly, almost in disbelief. "We actually did it." "Yes," Caden said, his eyes scanning the city. "And we've proven something important. Human courage, ingenuity, and cooperation. That's what makes us strong. That's why we survive. That's why we'll always fight back, no matter how dangerous the enemy." Leora smiled. "Together." Caden nodded. Together, they had faced the impossible, infiltrated Rael's orbital lab, outsmarted his forces, and neutralized the threat without losing their humanity. The city was alive, free from control, and reminded that the human spirit was stronger than any machine. In the weeks that followed, Caden and Leora helped the city rebuild. Citizens repaired networks, streets, and systems, guided by human decision-making instead of blind automation. The lessons of Rael's rise and fall spread quickly. Technology could never replace courage, intelligence, and adaptability. And Caden and Leora became symbols of hope, not because they were the strongest, fastest, or most powerful, but because they embodied the very best of what humans could be, brave, clever, and unyielding in the face of danger. High above the city, they looked out across the skyline. The neon lights no longer seemed oppressive, but alive with possibility. The streets below hummed with life, filled with people rebuilding, moving forward, and remembering that humans together could overcome anything. Caden placed a hand on Leora's shoulder. "We've survived this, and the next time someone threatens the city, humans will rise again. Always." Leora nodded, determination and hope shining in her eyes. Always. The city breathed around them, a living testament to human courage, intelligence, and spirit. Rael's shadow had fallen, but the light of human ingenuity shone brighter. And as long as humans stood together, no technology, no warlord, and no machine could take that away. The fight had ended, not with destruction, but with triumph. Not with fear, but with hope. Humanity had won, and for Caden and Leora, that victory was just the beginning.